Hello and welcome, New Meta Podcast, episode 107, the second duopod in a row. What is going on? But we've swapped Adam for Marco. Marco, how are you doing? How's your absence?
Oh, very good. Very, very good. Very refreshed. Had a lot of time to just chillax and read, and all those toxic pubs just went straight out of the system. Nice. Came back all zen.
Have you listened to the duopod?
I actually had a great time chilling in the sun listening to that duo pod. I wanted to make notes when I was listening to it because I was like, I knew I'd get flamed and I knew they'd make all these jives and I needed to give my rebuttal.
Yeah. Well, a classic Adam flame that I think we'll be discussing this episode is we're talking about big tanky, annoying sort of cores, and we know how much Adam likes to sit in a lane for like 20 minutes. So
the hard carry centaur, Adam special. The special,
yeah. Adam fancies himself as a Terrorblade player these days. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, he's the Arteezy 3.0 playing Naga and Terrorblade all day, every day.
Naga Midas, that's just not fair. Got to give him a chance.
Yeah, so snoozy.
Yeah. Topic of the day then, as I sort of mentioned, kind of hard to put your finger on it, but we're going to be talking about sort of cores that aren't the highest damage dealer on the team. I'm thinking, your Timber is a hero that we're probably going to use as an example most often. But also, your Necros and your whatever, Vipers, stuff like that might be relevant to all of those heroes and how to move them around, where to put them, what they want to be doing in a game, how they add and take away pressure without necessarily being, the hard carry that's going to win you the game at the end, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you could say the mid lane beefy boys.
Yeah, I like that, the mid lane beefcakes. And I love me a beefcake, my Necro and the Viper, it's a good little beefcake. Viper's not really a beefcake, but I don't even know what that hero is. That hero is just like a poison sting, nuisance, grim hero. Before we get there, though, let's take a question. And the question I'm going to take this week is from big friend of the pod, Wiggy. Also, my benefactor. I know that Marco very kindly gifted me the Immortal Pugner item. So thank you very much for that. But I'm afraid to say you've been immediately outdone by Wiggy, who sent me the Golden Pugner.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So, yeah, that's very much appreciated. So, in true sellout fashion, that means you get a question on the pod. Although we've got many to choose from, the one I've decided to go with is basically, let's see how it was worded here. You are fed up Dota right now. You're fed up of Dota right now, and need to switch game to unwind. What game do you pick and why? Well, we know Adam's answer, even though he's not here.
Animal Crossing, yeah.
Of course. Marco?
If I'm honest, what do I switch to unwind? Well, it's still in the Dota client. It'd just be the lab. I've been unwinding on the lab for the last few months, and it's been great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice and chillaxed. No pressure. It's
It's difficult for us to answer because I feel like I don't know about you. I always get this if I ever talk to someone and sort of gaming comes up or something, and if I ever mention that I do a podcast about Dota, a computer game, people presume that I'm like some big gamer, like into all these games, but the truth is I'm not into games at all. I'm into Dota 2 and that's it.
Yeah.
You should see my Steam. So my Dota time played is embarrassingly huge. We're coming up to 5k hours, by the way. Very close, like just shy of 5k hours. And then my next most played game is Cities Skyline with 12 hours. So that goes to show that sort of what we're dealing with. That said, though, at the moment for me, it's probably chess, like chess.com chess, which friend of the pod, Brother Joe, cruelly got me into, which this like horrific game that's like the hardest thing I've ever played in my life.
Have you climbing the chess.com ladder?
No. Since I got back into it, so I was into it a little while ago, I don't know how, like whatever, 5 months ago. didn't play for 4 months, got back into it, and have since lost like 100 MMR or something. Nice. It's impossible. I'm just so bad, and there's no feeling worse than when you consider a move for like 40 seconds, which doesn't sound long for chess, but when online chess is like quick, so that is quite a while.
Yeah.
And you're like, you feel like you calculate everything. You move your queen for like this sick play, and then they just take your queen with a bishop, and you just didn't even see it. There's no feeling worse than that.
Yeah.
Hard game.
Overthrow? That's another one.
Yeah, you really don't. I was trying to think of what games you have to unwind, but you really don't have, I feel like, any games to unwind other than Lab.
Yeah, other than Lab. I know, I mean, there isn't an answer outside the Dota 2 client.
Yeah, there is a game that we play if we're ever together in person.
If we're together, get the FIFA out.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's a classic.
That is a classic, yeah. Best FIFA for the fans?
12.
12, yeah, I like that shout. I think 16 as well. Right, anyway, enough of that nonsense. New FIFA's like patches. I hadn't even thought of that. They're kind of like patches.
Well, like every new game.
Every year there's a big patch, and that's kind of like there's a new FIFA. Not that I've played it since 16, but there you are. Marco, what's happening in the world of Arcana?
So, in the final, we got our 2 purple carry boys, Void, or Faceless Void, and Spec. I'd be interested to hear what you think the outcome will be, or who you want the winner to be. I don't know if we have talked about it. I feel like we haven't. But I'm quite surprised to see Spec in the final. Yeah,
so am I.
I wouldn't have thought it would be the most popular. Maybe in the recent patch with the return of Spec, and Spec win rates have been really good the last few months. This post Monkey Business Dota, we then went into this Spec favored longer patch. Maybe that's helped her popularity.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I'm also surprised that Spectre's here. Yeah.
Who would you vote? Who have you voted for, or who do you want to get it?
Well, I don't actually mind that much. I have voted for Faceless Void. I wouldn't mind seeing a Spectre Arcana. I think it'd be quite cool. I do think you can do quite a lot of cool stuff with Void, though, with Chrono and Time Walk. Where Spectre, I'm sure they'll find some crazy stuff to do, but the spells don't scream cool particle effects. You know, like Haunt's just a bunch of illusions.
Watch Void win it and they just change time dilation and nothing else.
Maybe. I mean, that would be pretty disappointing. They changed the colours in all the Arcana, so even though both these heroes are purple, they won't be when the Arcana comes out. There'll be some weird golden or some red or something with a, unlockable colour where they turn green or something weird like that.
Yeah. But the Spec semi-finals against Doc, Spec got a lot of votes, 16 mil against Doc's 13 mil, which is pretty unfortunate for the Doc meme to not get to the final. Whereas Void only got 15 mil against a 7.5 mil sniper. So a lot of turnout for Spec. I don't know, is that partly because people were sick of the Doc meme and so rebelling against the Doc in favour of the Spec?
Possibly. Maybe people thought that Faceless was a free win against Sniper, so they'd go to the most contested one, which was the Spec Doc.
Yeah.
Devastating for Faceless if he doesn't win again. It'll be the second final in a row that he's lost.
Oh, that would be sad. When is the end of the Battle Pass? Is it?
An extra 3 weeks, I believe.
An extra 3 weeks, okay.
Yes, and which is a wake-up call for me for the Cavern Crawl, because I need a win on Slark. I haven't actually done that yet. If I win on Slark, then I unlock him and I unlock the alternate style, so that's quite cool.
Ah, nice.
Crazy if anyone's done the Cavern Crawl and the Falfell, the underground Cavern Crawl. If anyone's completed both of all of them, then that is some serious work that's been done.
And have you got your lab lines?
No, I haven't got my lab lines, but they'll probably go, right? I mean, I don't think they're going to last.
Oh, do you think they won't last after the Battle Pass?
None of the other lines do, so I don't think these ones will.
Oh, that's sad then. They were fun to play with.
Let's go to games. I know you've been away, so I don't really know if you've got much to contribute to games. Have you much to contribute?
I came back and it's quite funny. After watching a lot of world-class Dota 2. Well, I say a lot just watching the Noob from UA highlights because it was the Omega League. So I was really entertaining to watch the highlights of. I'm there away, just lying on a sun lounge, just thinking, God, Dota 2, what a game! Get me back. Let me enjoy this game that I've been watching for the last week. And I come back with these exceptionally high expectations of, I cannot wait to play Dota 2 the way it should be played, like Team Secret level kind of thing. Yeah. We're just going to play the beautiful game, get back into a pub, and it's like, is this Dota? Is this what I actually thought it was? And I was just immensely disappointed that pub Dota is just a different universe.
Yeah.
That's fine, it is great fun, but it's just when your expectations are like, got to come back to just perfection and you just come back to like kicking a ball against, I don't know, in some kind of garbage
against
pit.
Your own face.
Yeah. So the first couple of games, but also you're really rusty after a big break. And I'm playing these weird, bad heroes, Zeus and Timber from the mid. Just, I can't really play these heroes well. So that was kind of a rough return, but then there was a bit of a win streak. Got to play with the Wind Ranger Arcana. That was fun. Got to have an anti-mage. That was an intense 50-minute game. That was fun. Had a Void Spirit 31-0-24. That was stompy. Everyone in we had a 5-man guild game for that, and everyone just smashed the lanes. And then,
how did you build the Void Spirit there?
So in a game like that, I'm playing it in the safe lane.
Okay.
Orchid Dezo. So with the Orchid, it's just constant uptime and constant kill potential. Dezo then to increase the damage to keep you snowballing. And then I think I got BKB, to make sure I don't ever die. And then I think Daedalus, Shivas, just slaughterhouse gaming.
Yeah.
So there have been a handful of decent games, none quite on the level of what I expected when I was dreaming Dota 2 on holiday. And maybe I need to play ranked again and get in some like competitive games. But it made me appreciate watching the game, and it made me think, God, I wish TI was happening, because when you watch high level Dota, I have a newfound appreciation. It's just so entertaining to see the best people play, because they play they don't play mistakes. They don't do anything wrong. They're playing on another stratosphere. And it's so fascinating to see that play out. I mean, particularly when it's like literal tier 1 EU teams, just the peak of the peak. So good. Yeah.
Definitely. I really enjoyed Omega League too. It's good to see. And I mean, Secret on another stratosphere, I feel like, even among tier 1 teams.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah.
I got, actually, one thing I did when I came back was complete the lab level 5 legitimately. No Ursa memes. Not going to shout out anything for that. So that was exciting, and that's a fun voice line now.
That's hard. Level 5 is hard. Did you find it difficult, or?
We got kind of lucky that I was a quap, and the bonus that the Grand Mages had in the last level was hard face. So the modifier being he's tankier to physical damage, where some of the modifiers like Deadly, where he does 25% more damage, or he's got one where every time he hits you, you're slow, so you get hit by the laser, your movement speed gets slowed, so you kind of can't escape it. Things like this. So we got a relatively easy modifier, which made the last round doable, but it was still pretty straightforward. Good team. Yeah, it was good fun.
Nice. Ease.
What about you? Have you got any ranked or unranked games in?
I got one ranked game in that was very disappointing. It was I did a duo queue with Aesthetics, friend of the pod, and we didn't win. That was unfortunate. I laned a Viper mid against an LC, and it was really good in the lane, and just like completely bullied the LC out. LC can come and do anything, but then it was sort of classic Viper where just stuff didn't happen because we had a Viper. We had an anti-mage carry. That wasn't the problem though. Our support duo was IO Urspirit, and this Urspirit had like never played Urspirit before or something. So it was really awkward. You know, he'd roll in to get a kill, and then rather than kicking the hero towards all 5 of us, he'd try and kick the hero and then would end up kicking him away. So
Yeah.
so to save him basically, and stuff like that was really, really frustrating. The IO was all right. IO had items in this game. It was a 49-minute game, and IO Pos 5 had Halberd, Satanic, Mech, Glimmer.
Wow.
So it was very strong. But then our Spirit Pos 4 had absolutely nothing. He had Vessel, Glimmer Cape at like 50 minutes, which is just not going to cut it.
Your team's asking for a loss with 0 lockdown. Earth Spirit, IO, Anti-Mage, Viper.
Yeah, we have Slardar.
That's not a reliable stun.
Yeah, we have a Slardar, but yeah, not the best. I have Atos, but yeah,
it's not.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, no, it wasn't a good game, and especially when I feel like so much relies on Earth Spirit in this one, and he was like the weakest player, so that was unfortunate. They had an offlane Tusk that did a lot of work. Core Tusk sometimes is just so frustrating when he's really tanky and he just one-shots you with like the hole and stuff. Really grim. So that was the ranked game. Other than that, I've won all my other games, but they've been 6 unranked games. OD, Meepo, Magnus, Slardar, Ember Spirit. Had a really fun Ember Spirit game. 15-1. Ember Spirit's so fun in these kinds of games, you know. Maelstrom, Yules Maelstrom, Yules Mjolnir. Oh no, Yules Maelstrom, BKB, then go back for Mjolnir, Ags, Satanic. Not Satanic, Shivas. So that's a fun one. Anytime you get Ags on Ember, it's just and level 25, it's just a fun time.
That is fun.
Yeah, so that was good. I don't think I have much else to report. Magnus mid is strong because you farm. That's old news. Whiffed an RP in that game. That was pretty fun. Also did get a huge RP on 4, but also whiffed an RP on 0 people. So
Karma.
Yeah, can't have it every time. Don't think I have anything else to report on my games. So, topic of the day, how do you want to start? Do you want to start talking about Timber specifically, or do we want to talk more about how the sort of tanky, beefy boys play post-laning? I don't think we need to talk about laning.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. Post-laning, 10-minute mark of the game if you're a beefy boy. And by beefy boy, we're on about these heroes like a Timber or a Necro, perhaps Necro, maybe a DK. Heroes that are a bit slow, that aren't going to be zipping around getting kills like a tempo intelligence mid is going to be doing, aren't necessarily going to do a lot of damage. It's hard for them to do a lot of damage. Like if you think about DK, that hero on its own, it's not like a Void Spirit that could single-handedly run a game. Damage output's quite limited. So at 10 minutes to say 20 minutes, how do you realize these guys' value? I think is a good discussion to have, and then
I think so.
It goes into Timber naturally.
Yeah. In terms of exactly what that looks like, then I feel like there's often 2 ways that this goes. Either you want to apply pressure or relieve pressure, right? Because you're sort of the hero that needs to be in the most difficult. And if you're relieving pressure, you need to slap yourself in like the most difficult lane or the most difficult area of the map to stop pressure coming in from the enemies there. I.e., that often looks like your safe lane, the quote unquote dead lane, especially if the tier 1 tower's gone. You sort of want to pop yourself in that lane so that your whole jungle doesn't get overrun. Would you say that's like the most common? And then alternatively, you either apply lots of pressure on the map, maybe in your off lane, their safe lane, and be knocking on tier 2s and sort of poking into their jungle and stuff like that.
I think I think tier 1s are probably still the name of the game at say 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I think I think you would most often be relieving pressure by applying pressure as a meaty boy. Say 10 minutes to 12 minutes in the game. I think defending an objective, say they do a big push to a tower, and you're a beefy boy like a Timber or a DK, I think you're very happy to meet that and provide resistance. Because as a meaty boy, if someone starts throwing loads of resources in your direction because, say, they're sieging a tower, you're very happy because your strength as a meaty boy and is easy to realize.
Yeah.
I think more difficult and more commonly would be you need to provide pressure to relieve pressure, and I think that would mean simply tier 1 pressure. So at 10 minutes in the game, I don't think most tier 1s are gone. How can you add pressure knowing that you can't really get a kill? Like, you can't walk through the woods as a DK and land a kill. But what you can do is you can literally just knock on a tower, be that say mid or in the off lane, even the safe lane, and it forces enemies to you. And if enemies come to you, you're happy because you want them to try and hurt you, because you know you want them to contend with you. If they don't, you get a tower, great. If they do, great. They're now in your face and not in your safe lane anti-mage's face, say. So you can do a lot of work by applying pressure to towers and objectives. I think this is what Beefy boys are meant to do, mainly, but it's not done. I mean, it's quite hard to do because you think about heroes and killing heroes or ganking. Dota is played in a very kill-centric manner, when actually, if you're a Beefy boy, your strength is either defending objectives, towers, or taking objectives in the form of towers. Yeah,
I definitely agree. And also, I think, in terms of the timer marching on and the game developing, knocking on tier 1s, i.e., like you said, applying pressure to relieve pressure. Once those towers are taken, or the map adjusts if tier 1s have gone down, say, on the enemy side of the map, it's sort of, you need to be cognizant of like how much danger you're in, like what kind of hero you're playing specifically. I think when you think of a Timbersaw, you often think of this crazy positioning in between tier 3 and tier 2, just applying tons of pressure, knocking on tier 2 early, or, relatively early. Say the tier 1 has gone down, the game's gone a bit later than the sort of situation you're describing. That's fine on a Timber because he has this escape, but like if you're playing a DK, you probably, or an Underlord, say, or something like that, or a Necro, you can't really do that because it's so easy for them to just kill you because you don't have an escape. You're so far away from your tier 1 tower, but if you're getting tier 2s. So the sort of calculation in your mind changes a bit. If you're playing a DK or a Necro or something like that, once you pushed tier 1, say you've killed the enemy safe lane tier 1, at that point onwards, you probably want to be close enough to tier 1s that you're not going to die, i.e. pushing mid tier 1 perhaps, or stopping enemy pushes, de-pushing waves that in dangerous areas and stuff like that. Versus like your Timbers or your, say, I don't know, like some Pangolier hero or something with escapes that basically means you can't die. Then you can keep applying pressure to relieve pressure even when tier 1s have sort of gone down and stuff like that, and your safe lane carry is safely farming away. Because also, just to make another point quickly that's sort of attached to the one you made, you mentioned applying pressure to relieve pressure. That's better than just relieving pressure by sitting in a lane, because in an ideal world, you want your safe lane carry to be farming a lane and not just farming jungle. So if the safe lane has turned into the dead lane, quote unquote, and that's a difficult lane to be in because of the access to the lane through your own jungle, I think that's quite a well-established Dota concept of why that lane becomes more difficult when heroes start moving around. You, in an ideal world, want to be applying pressure somewhere on the map so that those kinds of enemy movements can't happen onto your carry because they need to address your hero or else they're going to lose towers themselves. And that's massively beneficial because you want your carry to be farming lanes, right, as well as just jungle.
Yep.
Whereas if you just say, I'm going to relieve pressure by relieving pressure, I'm just going to sit in this dead lane and take and de-push the wave. Sure, you're not going to, you are relieving pressure, but your carry's now like, great, I have to farm jungle because you're in this lane that I want to farm, rather than you being on the other side of the map, soaking up heroes, soaking up spells and attention, basically, that allows your carry to like take that farm.
It's a point. It's been interesting hearing BSJ's reflection on time in EU versus NA, and he's literally been saying this kind of gameplay NA does not do, and EU does do, and EU is infinitely better because of it. And he says in NA there's a massive, I guess, culture and mindset about kills or farm or just kind of greedy gameplay. And BSJ says, when I was playing in EU, high-level pubs for a month or two, the enemy teams would apply so much pressure and make me get moved around the map. So by applying pressure, say, to a tower across the, let's say you are Radiant and you are like a Timber, and you're applying, you're knocking on the Dire off lane tier 1, it forces rotations. Or maybe it's the mid lane tier 1. If you're knocking on it with your body, it means the enemy has to rotate. They can't just ignore you taking a critical objective like that. But then by them rotating, you're going to free up space, like we've said, for your carry to be in a lane, farming lane creeps and jungle creeps, as opposed to just jungle creeps. Also, say it's a side lane tower that you as a Timber are pressuring. Not only are you going to force rotations from the enemy supports, and that relieves pressure and makes space. If you're in a side lane knocking on the tower, say that enemy carry, they now can't safely farm in that lane because there's a big scary Timber there. And so they've now got pushed into the jungle, or they're pushed to go across the map. Or even, say they do go across to the other side of the map to, say, the off lane to get creeps. It's still wasting time. The carry's dream scenario is that they just sit in the safe lane, going from lane to jungle, get the tower, lane to jungle. And that's the dream game. You can disrupt that if you're a meaty, beefy boy by going into their lane and knocking on the tower. You don't have to have the kill mindset of I need to get a kill, or you actually you don't. You just need to be applying pressure with your presence and knocking on the tower and forcing rotations. And then by making the enemy team always respond to what you do, you're always a step ahead, and you've always got that bit more space. And there's a point that BSJ really kept hammering home in his YouTube videos that the EU pubs did really, really well. And when I've been watching them, I've kind of been noticing it a bit, that there's so much objective pressure, i.e. tower pressure from teams. And you so often see these like 10-minute big kind of scraps because there's towers and these key objectives that teams are really not really forcing, but like really actively putting pressure on, and therefore necessitating a response from the enemy team. And so then you end up having a bit of like a 3v3 skirmish, say. But that's a very different mindset and playstyle versus, say, you're a Timber and you respond to the enemy team by de-pushing the mid lane. And it's like, well, why doesn't your Pulse4 Rubik just fade bot the wave and do the exact same job?
Yeah.
That's a big, big difference. Rubik can't go in the side lane and hit a tower and put pressure on the enemy Void who's farming, because he'll die and he can't do pressure. But you can do the same job of, say, de-push the mid lane and let Timber go and knock on the side lane. I'm going to apply pressure and stop the Void farming.
Yeah, definitely. And the example about Rubik taking the mid lane, that's something that happens in high-level pubs almost always, is that once the mid gets 6 or something, once the mid, say it is a beefy boy Timber or something, he just moves to a side lane because the mid becomes like this easy farm, and it's great for Rubik to get, that's so valuable for like a Rubik to get levels and some farm while Timber's applying pressure somewhere else. So it applies to all the way down to supports. It's not as simple as like, oh, my carry needs a good game and I need to disrupt the enemy carry. It's also, it can apply to supports and everything. It's very common for supports to rotate mid to take XP and farm once the mid goes away to apply pressure and stuff like that.
I think that often happens because the beefy boy mid lane isn't actually a great tower pusher. So if you're a DK or a Pugner, your key first objective is to take that mid tier 1 because you can. You've got Dragon Form or Never Blast, which means you can push. But a lot of beefy mid boys, let's say the Timber example, he's not a tower pusher naturally. So if you said to the Timber, you need to stay mid to get that tier 1 down as fast as possible, it's actually going to be very easy for the enemy team to stop that happening, because he's not going to kill the tower very fast. Mid's the most dangerous tower to try and take. So yeah, say there's a Rubik on the enemy team, it's very easy for the Rubik to de-push the Timber's tower push. So rather than some shitty tower pushing beefy boy do that in the mid lane, if you go to a side lane, you're not actually, it's again coming back to not even trying to execute an objective. It's not even trying to take the tower or take a kill, which we think are these paramount critical things to do. Just by being in that side lane, you're going to like very slowly push the tower, but more importantly, you're going to stop the enemy farming and you're going to force rotations, which then create space elsewhere on the map. Maybe you can make a skirmish or kill happen because you've dragged heroes to you. If none of that happens, you're going to get free farm from the lane and jungle and slowly get the tower and prevent the enemy from farming safely. All of that doesn't necessarily imply kills or tower kills, but implies a lot of win and value for you and your team.
Yeah, definitely. And often these things are deceptive. You know, if you're sitting in a side lane, as you should, and no heroes are coming towards you and you're not really being bothered, you know, I could definitely see myself and other people being like, am I really using my Timbersaw to my max ability? Do you know what I mean? But actually, if all the enemies, if you can't see any enemies on the map, on the mini-map, or, you know, in your face, then you're probably winning the game because it means they're not in lanes. Do you know what I mean? So it's, you think about stuff like that, I suppose.
I feel like we've been in loads of games where the enemy Timber's done exactly that, where they've been in a side lane, applying pressure to our core who's farming in that lane, or just applying pressure to the tower naturally by shoving the creeps and being a menace. And we've tried to respond by throwing loads of heroes down there, and like 3 heroes try and kill the Timber and it doesn't happen. Or worst case scenario, we try and like someone dies and Timber gets away. And it's like, it just feels awful. But that is the dream situation for a Timber. He's pulled rotations. He's got the best case scenario where he's not died and he's got a kill, say. Even if he doesn't get a kill but just survives, what a crazy amount of space he's provided.
I don't know if we want to take a pause to maybe talk about some Timber-specific items and stuff like that, because I feel like the hero is interesting, and I suppose this applies to a hero like Necro as well. Less so DK, because it's kind of a special case because of this stun that he has. I.e., you want to be... A lot of DKs look towards, you know, Blink and Shadowblade to set up for the stun.
Yeah.
But a hero like Timber or Necro, it's interesting the first item decision. Do you go for some sort of aggressive item like Atos? Obviously, Timber Atos is not very common, but... Or do you often see, you know, your Yours or your Hoods or something like that. When you see those items, is that sort of doubling down on this big beefy boy stuff, and it's with the intention of being more in face, being able to apply more pressure, i.e. reducing your risk of death.
I feel like Hood's core for Timber.
Yeah?
I think you could... There are maybe some greedy games people would skip it to go straight Bloodstone, but I do feel like the value of Hood on a hero like Timber who wants to do that, who wants to put his face into the enemy's face and say, come try and kill me, use your spells on me. Hood is the dream value defensive item.
Because you don't have a lot of your tankiness comes from the reactive armor, right? And rather than from having some massive HP pool. Obviously the strength here actually does have a big HP pool relatively, but if you reduce the incoming magic damage, then sort of you have the armor from reactive armor. So
yeah,
that's why it's so strong.
So I feel like the Hood. If I was playing Timber, I feel like I always do Hood. You get the mana boots, which you then change into Bloodstone, and they're your 2 core items. And then after that, I personally like Boots of Travel for the global mobility to always be shoving in creeps and being everywhere on the map. And after that, it's more game dependent.
Yours first item, like when's this being built? 'Cause it's quite a popular one.
Is it popular?
Yeah, I think so. I think yours is quite a popular one.
Feels bad.
I mean, it gives you mana regen, right? It gives you 5 mana regen, 20 movement speed, which is okay, and obviously the dispel, which is nice. If you're being silenced. It might be more value than a Hood for survival if you're coming up against silences, right? And purges or whatever. Or not purges, but you know what I mean, debuffs. Unless you dispel... Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, Yules can be a good item for that dispel, but I think because he's so tanky, I don't think he ever cares about, I need to dispel this 1 or 2 debuff that's on me.
It's always the silence, isn't it? That's the only thing.
Even if he gets silenced, he'll just tank stuff. Is the way I see him.
Yeah, but it's not as though Timber Chain isn't an important survival item. You know, that's what allows him to create space. You know, close the gap on here, or not close the gap, open the gap on here, let the reactive armor HP kick in for a bit. That's the situation where yours is bought, right? When Timber Chains is essential to get away from people going on you. I think in general, though, not to get caught up on Yules on Timber, in general, the point is that these items are core on Timber, or Hood is core on Timber, and Yules is a question mark on Timber, because the one thing that stops you doing all this map pressure and stuff like that is if the enemy can just rotate 2 heroes on you and kill you. So Hood and Yules make sure that you stay a beefy boy, right? And it's I think what we've said before about BKB when you're ahead applies as well to these sort of defensive items on Timber. You might have a great laning stage and feel invincible and think, let's just fly into a Bloodstone like first item, or I guess it would almost always be Bloodstone for Timber. Let's just fly into a Bloodstone. That's a kind of expensive item, right? 5.2k. By the time you're 2k away from Bloodstone, the game will have changed a lot, and you need to be really thinking about, not only am I strong now, am I going to be strong in 10 minutes with nothing, with like a Kaya and whatever, and like a point booster, versus do I need a Hood when I start moving into side lanes and stuff like that. I guess the point I'm making is I would hesitate to encourage Bloodstone rushes unless you're smurfing, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's fair to be honest. I would say Hood Yules is legit. And you could, for that reason, Bloodstone is expensive. It is not really got much defensive side to it. I mean, you've got the active and a bit of HP stats, but Yules can be that critical life-saving item. I think a Hood Yules is a very reasonable build-up. Yeah,
I think so. And I think, for the most part, Hood's Bloodstone is fine. It depends, especially from the mid. When you're playing off-lane, you might want to look towards more the sort of Greavesy, pipey, Shivasy kind of route, maybe even a Halberd or a Lotus. So the progression might be a bit differently. If you're playing from the mid lane, you kind of want Bloodstone. That's quite critical if you're playing mid.
I think that's a good point. Are you the mid? Are you the off lane? And depending on which you are, that means your farm and gold priority is a bit different. If you're in the mid and you have got more gold priority, then it's more reasonable to say go for the Bloodstone, boots of travel. But if you're the off lane and gold's a bit more sparse, then Yules is a bit more economical. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Where do you want to go next?
So let's progress down the game, deeper into the game. So say 10 to 15, 10-minute siege creep. Do they spawn in every lane, or is it just the mid lane?
That's every lane.
It's every lane. Okay, so a 10-minute timing is actually a really good one to apply a pressure to a tier 1. I think you could make it a very sound rule of thumb that as a Timber, 10 minutes, you should be strong enough, as long as you're not fed in the laning, to be able to tap on a tier 1 with a siege creep and keep that siege creep alive with your body, etc. And that's a way you can push a tower, and that would be really valuable. Then go and say like 15, 20 minutes in the game, tier 1s are down. How do you play? You've got to make sure you keep up your farm short. Let's say you go Hood. Let's say you're playing mid, and now in that 15 to 20 minute period, maybe like 15 to 23 minute period, you're going to be a bit more farm orientated to get that Bloodstone. But again, given you're a beefy boy, I think it's a note that you've made here. You've got to be the one farming in those more dangerous parts of the map. You've got to be the one who's getting the most risky creeps and neutral camps that you can get, because you're the one that's going to be hardest to kill and most likely to survive. And so in that way, you're going to have a farm priority in your mind for those next 8 minutes, but you're doing it in a way that's still applying pressure, and you're going to keep the creep waves pushed in, and you're going to force heroes to show themselves on the map because they have to de-push a tower, or you're going to be really aggressive in your farm that it forces the enemy team to go, hang on a sec, there's no way we can justify a Timber farm this deep in our woods. Let's go move 3 heroes over to him. Then when that happens again, the same scenario of you've made space elsewhere on the map happens, and that adds massive value to your team. So I think these same ideas of how you realize your beefy boy value still apply in this mid-game or farming orientated period.
I think so. And then mid-game onwards, obviously, like, skirmishes are gonna start breaking out a bit more frequently, but perhaps with less ferocity than they would later in the game, when lots of heroes have blinks and stuff can be done much more rapidly, burst and stuff like this. So at that point in the game, especially on a hero like Timbersaw, would you say that you want to deal heavy damage and like turning up to skirmishes whenever you can? I think you probably are a very critical hero in skirmishes, right? You don't want to be in a situation where I'm knocking on tier 2, I'm knocking on tier 3, like I'm gonna keep split pushing while there's a fight going on. Like you want to be in the midst, right?
Definitely want to be in the mix.
Especially if you're playing this hero mid when you've got a lot of XP. A hero like Timber, all his damage comes from levels, obviously. So it's even more critical that you're flying in with, you know, your level 2 Chakram and your maxed out Whirling Death and Timber Chain or whatever it is, you know. You want to be doing damage. And at this point in the game, a hero like Timber that is all damage all comes from spells, you haven't fought, your damage certainly is peaking, I would say, like in this mid game, as opposed to a hero that's based in physical damage, that's building a lot of damage items that peaks later in the game. So that makes it less important for you to sort of defend heroes, which is something we'll probably touch on a bit later. And it's more important for you to be flying in, dealing damage, forcing enemies back. Because, like I said earlier, the fights are less ferocious. They can't nuke your carry within a stun duration like they can later in the game. Whereas, so you need to shift more to like dealing damage at this point.
And in those mid-game fights, like you say, you can't just... Heroes aren't going to be deleted, say. But you as a Timber, you hit, say, this peak power point, like you mentioned. What, therefore, I think you should be doing is you obviously want to deal output damage, but also by getting in the face of the enemy, ideally you want to soak as much as you can, and you want to soak as much attention and spells as you can, because in that mid-game point, you are so strong and you will be tanky, you will be offensively dangerous, but you will be such a meaty boy that you're not going to die easy. So every spell you can take to the face, that's one spell that your teammates aren't taking to the face.
Yeah.
And so you really want to, it's like causing havoc. That's what you want to do, I think, in these mid-game skirmishes as the Timber. You really want to be flying on the enemy intel hero that's got disable or lockdown and getting in on their face and saying, oh, you want to like go and use your disables on my team? Well, I'm going to be in your face hitting and using spells on you. So I think you're going to have to use it on me instead. And if you take all that attention, again, it's the same themes of taking attention, relieving pressure off your team. You take all the burden on your shoulder, take all the spells and damage onto your shoulder. You can tank it, you can deal with it. You got the Yules, you got the Hood. Soak it all up. Also, you'll be doing damage naturally. And then in the meantime, your team's free to do their own thing. And that's the ideal way that your Timber fight's going to play out. Also on the fighting in the mid game, I think there are two scenarios which are how fights should happen. I think if you're a beefy boy Timber, or even like a DK, say, or just one of these slow, fat mid heroes that isn't tempo fast and mobile and can't like make kills happen, etc. Either A, you push a tier 2, so now we're in this mid game, you've got, say, that Hood, Yules, you got that second item, maybe you've got that Bloodstone finished. As a beefy boy, go and hit a tier 2, but with your team. So 20 minutes in the game, say, make a team push happen. If you're really strong and you're a really beefy boy and you want people to use spells on you and you want them to come to you, what's a great way to do that? Get your team on your back and go hit tier 2s and make a response happen from the enemy team. Make them come and if they contest you, that's great. You go and fly in and start the fight that you want to fight. If not, you get a tier 2 and it's a win. The second scenario, I think, would be if they're making a play onto your team, so be that onto your tower or onto, say, your carry that's farming. In that scenario, you've definitely got to rotate and be this knight in shining armor and defensively get involved and save the carry or save the tower. Those are the two scenarios I think fights with beefy boys should happen. I do not think with ill-pushed lanes, no vision on the map, should you be smoking with a Timber or a DK deep into someone's woods to get a kill, which then materializes into absolutely no objective.
Yeah.
You can't be doing these kind of, or even trying to fight when it's not a tower or just like randomly in the middle of the map or at the rock trying to do a rush or something, or all this other stuff sounds pointless. Either get a tier 2 with you and your teammates, or respond to enemy aggression. They're the only ways I think fights should really happen.
Yeah. And to maybe put like a easy summary on Timber, just in general, and a lot of these beefy boy heroes, whether it's playing in the mid game or fighting in the mid game, you want to be making enemies make tough decisions. You know, that everyone's played against Timbers that have been a menace. Everyone's played against, you know, your whatever hero that's a menace. Beefy boy hero that you can't deal with. It's so those games are difficult because you're forced to make tough decisions all the time, because they're always applying pressure that you need to respond to in some way, and that you're just winning just like mentally and literally when you force enemies to do that. Like when you mentioned running at an enemy in support with disable, they know they don't want to cast their Hex and Earthspike on you because you're a Timber, but if they don't, you might kill them. So, you know, you're forcing them to make a tough decision. Can I get into the fight and cast myself spells in a value way, or do I have to sort of quote unquote waste them here? That's a tough decision. Often they'll make the wrong decision. If you're flying yourself into a tier 2, the enemies have to think, are we seriously going to let this Timber take our tier 2 to 50%? Or are we going to go and kill him? How are we going to kill him? Because it's not as simple as bringing 2 heroes over to kill the enemy PA if they were trying to do this. This is tough, right? You know, tough decisions, and it's difficult to execute as well. You want to be forcing all of those decisions all the time. It's so much more value to do something like that than to like AFK farm in a jungle and they have to make no decisions, or in a fight it's so much easier than, I don't know, your Timber arriving late, i.e. not rotating because he wants to get at this last lane, or not being in the face of enemy heroes and just sort of like trading 10 seconds of time using all his spells on your Underlord or something, you know?
Yeah.
It's, you really want to be like forcing tough decisions all the time, and that's the beauty of a hero like Timber, or even say a Necro or something like that, is that they're just hard to deal with. So It requires a lot of brain power and execution to actually do anything about it.
Yeah, it's a really good way to put it, that you're forcing the enemy to make hard decisions is a really good phrasing. Another way to think about a beefy boy, say Timber again, a hero like that, they are, and it links to your point you made about when they are doing shenanigans between the tier 3 and the tier 2, which is common for what should be obvious reasons. But a hero like Timber, even someone like Viper or Necro, these beefy boy heroes, they are least scary when they are not on the map. Yeah. If I'm playing a game and I'm a carry, Pods 1 anti-mage, and I can't see Timbersaw on the minimap, I'm laughing. I'm happy. If he's not on the minimap, he's not at a tower, and he's not like in the face of any enemy hero, I'm not scared. But suppose he's like walking through the woods to try and kill me, he's a Timbersaw. I'm not scared. I'm going to blink away, or you could literally stand there and TP and alt tab. Timber is scary, and a Viper scary, a Necro scary, even a DK scary. These guys are scary when they're on the map and when they're knocking on a tier 2, or they're in between the tier 2 and the tier 3, or they're in the lane that your carry's trying to farm. They're scary when they are visibly showing on the minimap and making pressure and making those difficult decisions have to be made.
And it comes back to what we were saying right at the start, right? And the reason is because they're not kill heroes. You compare a Timber to another strength core that's often played in similar roles, like Axe. Axe, you're scared if he's not showing, because he could literally kill you with a blink call.
Yep.
Timber, he can't kill you. If he comes out of vision, like you said, if he comes out of vision right next to you, who cares? You literally, like you said, you just can TP and alt tab like it's not scary. That's not the scary part of the hero. The same way that if an Axe is knocking on like your tier 2 tower or something, that's not that scary because you know you can rotate a couple of heroes and kill him, i.e. Timber you can't, right? You're going to need like 4 heroes.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more scary, it's a lot more difficult. So it's just about thinking about what your hero does, and when it comes to Necro and Timber and stuff like that, you definitely don't want to be smoking through the enemy jungle to try and kill the anti-mage. You want to be completely shutting him down by occupying space all the time, occupying lanes, like pushing towers, constricting the map, not trying to get kills, right?
And I think it's reasonable that playstyle of, say, Timber and these beefy boys is harder and is more uncommon, because the norm would be, let's say you're a mid laner, the norm is that you've got tempo and you've got kill potential and you've got damage and you want
to stay off the map.
Yeah, exactly. What else was I say? Dota is very kill centric. Also a lot of like, say you're playing a carry position or even from the mid, you're kind of happy to AFK farm a bit because gold is always good. But then when you're a beefy boy, these rules of off map, ganking, damage, kills, AFK farming because you're going to transition, and what's that word when you kind of scale to the late game? Most of these ideas don't apply to these beefy boys, and so you really have got to flip your playstyle on its head and start going, okay, I don't need to AFK triangle farm because it's efficient. You need to instead be showing your face at a tower or showing your face in a lane and applying pressure like that, and realigning your objectives away from I have to kill enemy heroes, let's go smoke through the mid lane, to I'm just going to apply space, like you say, apply pressure, etc. So it is a hard playstyle for sure, and I think that's why Bristleback, for example, is why I always have massive irks with playing with this hero, because and you see it in the win rates. I don't think it's an easy hero to execute. He's got crap win rates for good reasons. It's easy to just kite and ignore, and it's fine. I think largely it's because Bristleback also has to play in a similar play style where they're a beefy boy, and you've got to do work with your beefy boyness that requires like tower pressure, map pressure, putting your hero in these positions that are relatively unnatural.
Yeah, I think so. Let's talk a bit about itemization and the late game, because as we mentioned, Timber's damage peaks at this point and doesn't really increase that much. There is the exception of Aghanims, which is like a very high damage item to buy. But in general, right, you want to be this menace hero, and even into the late game, I think Timber's often itemized to do that, i.e. to be super annoying. And I'm looking at items like Lotus or Halberd, or even Greaves and Pipe if you're doing it maybe from the off lane or something like that. And the reason those items are so valuable is because you can save heroes with them, right? You're not getting Halberd to save yourself. You're getting Halberd to like save your carry and your supports and be a menace that's going to constantly be popping a Halberd active on heroes like every 18 seconds in a fight. Or a Lotus that you can just slap on your carry and protect them even more than you're able to do in the mid game because your damage has fallen off a bit more. And like you said, you're a bit easier to kite. So I think that's like the reason why these items show themselves. I mean, I don't know if you have any conflicting or additional thoughts on the items that you see popping up on Timber, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they all make sense, and they're all going to be, I think after that Yule's Bloodstone pickup, you're now going to go a bit more game-specific later in the game. I love a Lotus. That's probably underbought. Similar functionality to the Yules, how you can dispel.
Yeah.
But then with a Lotus on you, it makes the life of enemy supports and enemy disables that much harder, because they now literally can't stun you, because then they'll stun themselves. So Lotus is amazing for that. It gives him armor, he's very happy with. Gives him regen, mana and HP regen, happy with. So Lotus is massive. Then, like you say, Halberd, yeah, you're just going to be disrupting enemy damage. I think Shivas you could pick up in some games, probably a bit less likely. But again, if you want to build your armor up and slow down the enemy right clicks, Shivas is the way to go.
Yep.
And then, did you mention Ags? So
Ags is sort of a bit different. How do you see the Timber Ags?
It's not. So when we're getting into the late game itemization, it's hard to give. There's no hard fast rule.
Yeah.
But if there's an item or if you're in a situation where you go, I need to bring more damage to the table, and I'm sufficiently tanky, and I don't need to get BKB Lotus. Just Lotus is simply fine. Say the damaged item, I think most times, I mean, it kind of has to be the Ags. There's no other item that really increases Timber's damage like Ags. You could say Dagon, but that is way more expensive and a bit too one-off, whereas the Ags has obviously got way more uptime and therefore damage potential. So if you need damage, Ags is the way to go.
Definitely, Ags is a sick item. There's no doubt about it on Timber. It's a very cool item, and it does increase your damage a lot. Like, a lot. Gives you 2 ultimates. I mean, what more do you need to say? Gives you 2.
Yeah, doubles your damage output. And if you're playing from the mid, it's maybe more likely that the team needs you to bring a bit more damage to the table.
Yeah.
Maybe especially from the off lane, not so.
Exactly, yeah, because if you're playing mid, you might have a Beefy Boy off lane, and then you don't need a Beefy Boy mid as much. You want more damage, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I could see a lot of people that play Timber mid auto going Ags like every game. Whereas I don't think that's necessary if you've got an off lane that's high damage. Like, say you've got a Wind Ranger off lane, which is bad, but in pubs, very common, or you've got some other high damage offlaner that's just building for damage. I don't know what that would be. Some Night Stalker that's going like Basher, Solar Crest or something like that. Then I think you can treat yourself a bit more like an offlaner. That's like a general rule to playing these Beefy Boy mids. So it's game dependent. It's not lane dependent, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's just more likely to be a certain game state if you're playing mid, right?
Yeah. I think Timbersaw's a good or a fun Beefy Boy because he does have mobility. So maybe I should clarify, it's not mobility like how... I mean, it is mobility, the Timber Chain, but then the rest of his kit doesn't mean he can get kills and make kills happen the way, say, a Windrunner, Storm, Quap can make kills happen. But the fact he's got this mobility spell is pretty fun. Also, the Boots of Travel, I do think, is the best pickup for Timbersaw to just be globally around the map. His mobility aspect versus other meaty boys, say like a DK, is a bit better, and his farm potential is a bit better in the late game in terms of you've got the mana regen from Bloodstone to sustain. This is a mid Timber. But I think in the late game, Boots of Travel, he can get quite farm orientated and just do quite a lot of farm on the map that other beefy boys like DK just literally wouldn't be able to match. So I think that's quite cool because then it means you can transition into, I just get more items, get more defensive items, just become a bigger menace. That is quite fun. Timber Chains, fun spells. So yeah, but he still does all these 101 meaty boy, beefy boy plays.
Yeah, I think so. And another maybe final point, especially looking into the late game, it depends what kind of your carry matchup. I think is a little bit important. The reason I say this is because if you're a Timbersaw and your carry is a Spectre, it's not that important that you protect your carry. If your carry is a Drow Ranger, it's very important that you protect your carry. So that carry matchup's quite important. If it's a Drow versus a Spectre, the enemy Spectre, you've got a Drow, you really need to be within touching distance of your Drow, like in team fights, or the Drow's going to die to this spec, to this stuff like that. Whereas if you've got, I don't know, a PL or a Spectre or something like that, and the enemy's a Drow Ranger, i.e. like a very weak hero, glass cannon-y kind of hero, then it becomes more important that you fly into the enemy carry. So I just think that is quite important to think of the carry matchup when you're making the decision of, do I need to protect or do I need to fly into the enemy? That's just a final point. I watched a Gork Timbersaw game where the matchup was Drow versus PL. Enemy PL, Gork had a Drow who's playing Timber. And the fights were very much, I need to protect my Drow because I can't kill the PL. So and I can't even really hurt the PL. The PL can just ignore me, kind of thing. Will go around me, will kite me. The only way that the PL has to answer to me is if I'm protecting my Drow or Chakraman, Whirling Death, and then obviously the PL can't just stay on top of Drow when he's getting hit by all these Timbersaw spells. And that would be completely reversed if the carry matchup was the other way around. If Gork had the PL and he was against a Drow, then in the fight it's more a matter of flying into the enemy core or flying into the enemy supports or whatever's the most value, because the extent to which you need to defend is just not as important.
Yeah, and that then, thinking about your example of, do you defend your team more or put your face in the enemy team more in these team fight scenarios? You can imagine, say in the Drow scenario, I don't know what items Gork got, but to me, that's where, say, your Yules, Halberds defensively come into play really nicely. Maybe not Yules because of PL, but Yules, say, defensively.
Yeah, like a Shivas maybe you might want to get in that.
Yeah, or a Shivas to just mitigate the enemy versus, say, if that's not a requirement, you've got more freedom to, say, go Lotus yourself and fly into the enemy backline.
Yeah.
And get Bloodstone, and you don't have to get the Halberd Shivas, say, because, yeah, you're going for more offensive action in those team fights. So, yeah, it's an interesting distinction.
Well, I mean, I don't think we have anything else to mention then. Keep sending in your questions. I'll include the link to the questions in the pod descriptions going forward. Join the Discord as always if you haven't. Link in the description too. And until next week, when I believe we'll be reunited after 3 long weeks of duopods. Well, 2 weeks of duopods, but 3 weeks since the last. Yeah, join us again then and have a final whistle for your trouble.